Hey guys, and welcome back to another podcast here at the Good Fight Church. Me and Pastor John are going to talk today about how we can have healthy habits. See, last week we talked about what are the keys to staying connected to God? What are the keys to having a healthy relationship with Him and bringing Him into everything that we're doing? And this week it seems only fitting to talk about how do we stay consistent in our relationship with God? And I think that draws us into that question that says, what are healthy habits? What are healthy habits that would get us closer to the Father? But not just what are they, but how do we set those habits in our lives? How do we actually get from point A to point B? Not that our Christian disciplines are the foundation of our relationship with the Father, but that they show our reliance on our relationship with the Father with how frequently we practice those things, like spending time with Him and being in the Word. And so today we're not going to talk so much what they are, but we're going to talk more about how to get there. How do we get to those habits being in practice in our life? And so what are some of those keys to habits to you? What are some of those things for you?
Yeah, I think it starts though with a bigger picture and knowing, okay, what it is we're trying to accomplish. So I think for me personally, the best way that I found this rhythm or how do I stay consistent is first I need to know my purpose. And so whether that's at my job, in my household, or just life in general, is what is the purpose that God has given me for each situation? Now there's an overview of what purpose is, and I think purpose is showing the gospel or sharing the gospel and the light to people and glorifying God in all we do. But we all do that a little bit different. So if we want to stay consistent, first we got to find out, why are we created? What is our purpose? Then we move on to setting goals or mapping the course. And this is where we start those healthy habits and get rid of those unhealthy habits. And two things that I want to talk about today that knocks me off course, and maybe you can relate to this as well, is risks versus issues whenever I'm living out my purpose. And those two things have a tendency to get me distracted or sidetracked with my purpose. And it destroys habits and also creates unhealthy habits. For example, risk. And if you have children, you know what I'm talking about is if I have healthy disciplines or habits and I want to be consistent in those, if you have children, oftentimes your schedule kind of goes out the window. You know, when you get home, you're like, okay, at 5 I'm going to get home, at 5:30 we're going to eat dinner, and at 6 we're having a Bible study. I mean, whatever your life looks like. Mine doesn't look like that all the time. And but that doesn't always happen. You know, I come home and the first thing I hear is, my sister hit me, or my brother's pestering me, or the kids are driving me crazy and I haven't done anything or been able to get anything done. And I don't know what I'm in. And sometimes I have to try to figure out what's a risk, meaning what potentially could, stop us down in our mission or our goals versus an issue that is already happening. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, I've got to take care of this immediately. This is what I would consider a fire. And now it's time to focus on that. Sometimes I jump the gun and I start working on risks instead of the issues.
Yeah.
And it gets me off course, meaning like, hey, the issues are fine, but don't panic. When we start to panic, we start to let fear override. And so whereas I go home and if I'm supposed to kiss my wife and hug my children and ask how everyone's day was, I get sidetracked or redirected because panic and fear sets in. And maybe it's not with me, maybe it's with the kids or with a wife or a friend or a church member. And I allow their risk or our risk to bump me off those habits that I've created, the things that are central to a healthy lifestyle with Jesus and my family. Things like going home and kissing my bride and saying hi to the kids and basically connecting with them before we correct the situation. And I allow risks to come in and I panic and I get fearful. Whereas an issue, those are things like, hey, I need to stop down. I come home, I see that one of my children are hurt. That's an issue. Whereas a risk is my son tells me some long, elaborate story about falling off a bike and that his bike's broken. Do I need to stop down everything and fix that tire or that bike immediately? Probably not. Maybe I should stay the course on my habits and then work that into my schedule later on.
And man, that's so good. I actually relate to that really well because when before we had Emberly, I was getting up at 5:10 every morning without fail. I would get up, I would spend some time with the Father, I'd spend some time in His Word, I would spend some time doing my prayer journal every morning, and then we had Emberly, and so suddenly my wife doesn't want me to set an alarm at 5:10 anymore because she's not sleeping that well anymore,
right?
You know? And so it shifted. So it shifted the way that I had to. And so I had to find new times that worked for my prayer journal. I had to find new times that worked for my time with the Word, with our Father. You know, I had to adjust these habits and start to find a really healthy time frame for those things. And so it brought this almost realization to me whenever I'm setting goals or trying to put habits in place, as I started to ask myself, what I imagine me getting to the goal that I want to get to. Maybe it's I woke up every day on time for a year, and I'm sitting there at the end of the year, and I'm looking back, and I ask myself, what got me to that place? What got me there, right? How did I get there? And so that starts to help me outline the process that will get me there. But then I start to ask myself as well, now imagine I'm at the end of the year, and I'm sitting there, and I didn't make it happen, and I failed completely. What got in the way? What were those things that sprouted up? What were those risks? What were those issues that sprouted up over the course of the year that started to diminish what I was working towards, right?
Right.
And so I really relate to that because I had to adjust course and course correct on some of those habits that I was really intentional with and I was doing a really good job with. And I think sometimes what we have a tendency to do is when we get derailed, we just let ourselves fall down. And I love the quote. It says, if you miss one day, don't miss two. Right? If you miss one day in the Word,
that's good.
Don't beat yourself up. Like don't destroy your relationship with God over the next month and a half because you feel guilt and shame because you missed a day. If you miss one, just don't miss two. You know, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to stay on course. You know, you just have to continually course correct. If I get a flat tire on a trip, you know, heading to a vacation with my family, that doesn't mean that I'm going to turn around and go home now, you know?
Yeah.
It means I'm going to change the tire. It's going to take a little longer to get to the place that I'm trying to get to, but I'm still continuing to my destination, you know?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times with our habits, what we do is we allow something to derail us, and then we just go back home. We just go back to where we started, and we're like, well, that didn't work out. I guess I'll try again next year. So you see that with New Year's resolutions all the time.
Yeah, defeat comes quickly after the New Year. It's like, one thing that you said, it kind of sparked interest in my mind and made me like kind of review how I've handled this in the past is, you know, to adjust those habits or to adjust the way you go about it. You know, 40-year-old me handles a situation completely different than a 20-year-old me. You know, I often say, like, there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat, but it doesn't matter who's wrong or right. Everyone's going towards the forward momentum, going the right direction. And I think it's super important as we grow older, and I think this is just learned with time and experiences, you have to learn how to fall forward. Mm-hmm. And you said you have to adjust those. I think that sometimes defeat comes in because we take a good habit that's been destroyed or knocked off course, and we just feel like, well, that didn't work. And maybe it wasn't the habit itself. Maybe it was a season or
the issues,
the
or the
risk, right? And so I wrote down is good past habits can be adjusted moving forward. Mm-hmm. And so what I think is really important to do here, and we do this at our restoration groups, but I think it's really important to do in our professional lives, in our marriages, and in our individual lives, is to do an inventory. Yeah. A daily inventory, or maybe you just heard it as a review, is maybe I look back and go, okay, was it the habit that was the problem? Was it my discipline the problem, or was it circumstantial? Yeah. And do what needs to be adjusted? Does it need to be my time? Does it need to be my energy? Does it need to be my thinking? Does it need to be my heart? Or does it just need to be my schedule? And so I think if we can look at it, and more importantly, maybe we bring someone else into the situation if we're really struggling, and this is where accountability comes in. And I think habits need those accountability. I mean, oftentimes we think of accountability as when I have bad habits. Mm-hmm. Like, help me get out of these bad habits. But I think accountability works both ways. Yeah. It's like, hey, let's move forward with these great habits, and I need your help to help me get there.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. I actually was discussing just the other day about goals and getting to habits and things like that. And I put 4 points was kind of like my deal. I said, write it down, place it somewhere that you can see it
Yes.
frequently. That way it's not just this like dream out in the universe somewhere. It's like, hey, this is tangible. So I write it, I place it, I visualize it. What is it going to look like when I get there? Is there a reward for me achieving this? Like, is there something I'm going to do to celebrate this victory in my life, right? So I want to visualize what it's going to feel like when I get to the end goal. And then the last one is tell somebody.
Yeah.
Create accountability. Accountability for goals, accountability for habits is such a big deal. When you have a brother or sister in Christ that you're like, hey man, I'm going to try really hard to read my word this week. Will you hold me accountable to that? There's just almost this thing inside you that doesn't want to let them down, as well as it's somebody standing by you to say, hey, dust yourself off, get back up, let's start moving forward, you know?
Yeah.
And so for me, there's two major things that I want to do whenever I'm setting a habit in my life. I want to look at what can I maximize and what can I minimize, right? And to break that down a little bit, I want to ask myself, how can I maximize the reminders in my life for this habit? So for me, let's say that when I want to eat dinner with my family as soon as I get home from work, you know, so the maximizing of reminders starts the morning of. Okay, what am I having for dinner tonight?
Yeah.
What do I need to set out to thaw? What do I need to have ready when I get home? And then I need to put it on the counter. For me, I'm a very visual person. So when I put things out on the counter, it reminds me, oh, I need to do that. I need to do that. And so walking in the door, I see the dinner that's out there, and I've created these reminders again and again and again. And so it's getting me to the goal of having dinner with my family more frequently, right? But most of the time we just say, I want to have dinner with my family more often. I want to make a habit of having a good, healthy family life. And then there's no process to get you there, you know? So I want to maximize the reminders, and then I want to minimize the frictions, right? And what I mean by that is, let's say that I'm wanting to lose weight and I have Oreos sitting in the cabinet all the time. Well, that's going to be a friction in the direction to my goal, right? And so I want to take these things and get rid of them as much as possible so that it doesn't derail me from getting to the habit that I'm trying to achieve, right? But so often what we do is we set ourselves up for failure, knowing our weaknesses, knowing our risks, knowing our issues, knowing the things that we need to get rid of, and we leave those in our personal context, whatever our goal or our habit we want to start is, right? Maybe you're distracted. You're like, I want to read the Bible every morning and spend time with the Father every morning. And yet you leave your phone right by the Bible and Facebook suddenly becomes more tempting than the Word of God, right? I've fallen into that before. And so what I want to do is I want to leave my phone somewhere else so that when I go spend time with my Father, I'm spending time with my Father and I'm not distracted by any email or a text message or a Facebook notification. And so what we want to do is when I'm creating habits in my own life, for sure, I want to minimize all of these frictions as much as possible, because or else I'm going to find myself derailed. And again, most of the time when we find ourselves derailed, we miss 1 day, 2 days, 10 days, 15 days.
Perpetual.
Yeah, and then you're like, man, how did I end up here? I had a goal earlier in the year. I had this thing that I wanted to do earlier in the year, and I totally missed the boat. And you missed the boat because you allowed yourself to fall and fall and fall and fall until eventually you just gave up. Or you weren't really convicted to start it to begin with. And I think I see people do that all the time. I'm going to start this thing, and it's almost an impulse, you know?
Yeah.
And the Bible says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. And
Right.
so I want to weigh my options, you know? And if I'm going to commit to something, I want to be steadfast in that thing, you know?
Right. You know, let your yeses be yes and your noes be noes. Mean what you say and say what you mean. One thing that I learned early on in my walk with Christ, or I just say a very important life lesson when I finally surrendered to Christ that's helped me, but maybe someone needs to hear it, is when I first gave my life to Jesus, I looked at it like, okay, here's my walk with Jesus, but then I have my work life, and I have my family life, and I have my professional life, and I have my hobbies and all this thing. And I was creating habits in each one of these areas of my life, and it was so much harder. At first it wasn't hard because everything was brighter, everything was prettier, everything was louder and more clear with Jesus. But then life started to happen again, and the wall started closing a little bit. And here's what I'm talking about, is I had created habits here, I'd created a different habit here, and they're all kind of the same habit, but they are all kind of all over the place. And the reason why is because I was dividing different areas of my life. And I was told by a mentor of mine, and this is why accountability is so important, is like, why are you doing that? I said, well, there's the secular, and then there's the spiritual, and then there's the professional. No, it's a lifestyle with Jesus. Mm-hmm. And so my habits at home should carry over to my habits at work and my habits in my spiritual life, they may look a little different, but they should have all the same purpose, right? That's why it's so important to know our purpose, and then we can map out a course and set those goals. Last week we talked about starting small to achieve big.
Yeah.
And I think to me that's the difference between good and great is learning that there's not the work life and the family life and the spiritual life. It's all together.
Yeah.
And so are my habits overreaching different segments of my life? And just hearing you talk just kind of reminded me, and I'm kind of excited because I've got to do an inventory today to review and say, how do I get my spiritual life and professional life all together going in the same direction instead of here's this lane, and here's this lane.
Man, that's so good. And I would say just two more things. I would say begin with the end in mind, and I think that's totally what you're trying to hit on is just I want to begin with where am I going with this? Why am I heading that direction? What does it even look like when I get there? And what is the end goal? Like you've said time and time again, so often we start our habits and not recognizing what the end goal is, right? We're just trying to do this because we know we're supposed to. I see all the time in the church world reading the Bible. I need to read my Bible every day because it's what I'm supposed to do. And it's like, okay, what's the end goal? Because the end goal is actually a better relationship with Jesus Christ, not that you have memorized all of the scriptures.
Right? Are we just doing the disciplines because we know we're supposed to do the disciplines?
Yeah.
Do we know the why behind it, and do we actually feel it and apply it?
Exactly. And it's got to draw me to it. And I've totally missed the boat if I've read my Bible every day for 5 years, but I have no idea who Jesus Christ is, right? And so I have to start with that and then recognize that when I'm reading the Word, my goal is to draw closer to the Father.
Yeah.
And so what a lot of people will do, well, I read my Bible verse for the day, check.
Yep.
And when you begin with the end in mind, what it helps you to do is remember what the end goal is. What's the point? What am I actually heading to? And what's the why? You know what I mean? Like, why am I doing all of this?
And what is the purpose?
Yeah, and so often what we do is we don't have that purpose that you're talking about, We just start and we're flippantly kind of going through life and we're like, well, I'll end up where I end up. And it's like, man, no, like, we want to be a people of God that are living with His purpose in mind. The purpose that He created us for, the purpose in this moment. And God cares deeply about the details of our lives. Right. And so it's so essential for us to be able to turn to Him and ask, what's the purpose of this, God?
Yeah.
And how can I start with that? How can I start with that? And so I don't know about you guys. I don't know where you're at right now, but I want to encourage you guys to drop a comment below. Let us know, what are some habits in your life that you found effective? What are some habits in your life that maybe you've completely dropped the ball on? And if this has been helpful to you guys, go ahead and smash the like button. It helps us to get the message out there further, to help other people know that, man, we have keys of connection and keys of consistency in our relationship with the Father. And go ahead and click that subscribe button. We're going to be trying to do this every single week, get some content out there for you guys. This conversation, we're taking time to prepare and make sure that what we're putting out there for you is something that would be of value. And so let us know what you want to hear. Let us know a topic that you want us to discuss or
even what you're struggling with.
Yeah, definitely.
We definitely want to help you there and kind of, not only encourage you, but how do we help you get on track as well? It's something we want to do not only as pastors, but as a church and a body of people.
Yeah, and that's the whole goal of this podcast, is to put out there stuff that would be beneficial to your walk with Christ, to draw people closer to the Father through our conversations. And so I hope this has been beneficial to you. We want to both say welcome home and fight the good fight.